I broke my best friend's nose on a Tuesday afternoon. And I'd do it again without blinking. I know that's not how most people start a story. Most people build up to it. They give you context. They walk you through the warning signs. They make sure you understand they're not the kind of person who does that sort of thing. I get it. I'm not the kind of person who does that sort of thing either. Or at least, I wasn't. But when you've been friends with someone for 16 years, when you stood beside him at his own wedding, when you helped him move apartments 3 times, and drove 4 hours to his dad's funeral, and then you find out what he did, context stops feeling important. So here it is. My best friend slept with my wife, for 14 months, in my house, and when I found out I hit him so hard his head bounced off the kitchen door frame. That's where we're starting. My name is Liam, I'm 34 years old, and until about 8 months ago I thought I had a good life. Not a perfect life, nobody has that. But a solid one. My wife, my daughter, our house in Guelph, my job in project management, my friendship, with the guy I'd known since we were 18, and sharing a dorm room at the University of Waterloo. I thought I knew what my life looked like. I thought I could trust the people in it. I was wrong about almost everything. My wife and I'll call her my wife because that's what she was, and I'm not going to give her a name here, because honestly, I can't even write it right now. We met in our mid-20s at a work event. She was funny and sharp, and she laughed at things other people missed. We got married when I was 28. Our daughter Haley was born 2 years later. She just turned 4. My best friend, I'll call him by his actual name, because he doesn't deserve the courtesy of anonymity, Garrett. Garrett Walsh. We met during orientation week at Waterloo, argued about hockey within the first hour, and somehow became inseparable after that. He was at my wedding, I was at his. When his marriage ended 3 years ago, his ex-wife, different story. Not my place to tell. I was the one who let him sleep on my couch for a month while he sorted himself out. A month turned into 6 weeks. I bought extra groceries. I drove him to viewings for apartments. My wife cooked for him. My wife cooked for him. I've thought about that a lot since. Garrett eventually got his own place across town. A condo near the Stone Road Mall 15 minutes from us. Close enough to drop by, which he did. Often. I worked long hours, project management in construction. Deadlines are real and they don't move. And sometimes Garrett would come by on evenings I wasn't home. He was like family. My daughter called him Uncle Garrett. He came to her birthday party in April. He sat at my kitchen table, eating the birthday cake my wife made, and watched Haley blow out her candles. I want you to sit with that for a second. I didn't find out through some dramatic confrontation. I didn't come home early and catch them. The way I found out was almost embarrassingly mundane. The kind of thing that happens, because people get careless when they think they're safe. I was doing laundry. That's it. I was doing a load of laundry on a Saturday morning. Because my wife had asked me to, and I was checking pockets the way you do because I'd ruined a load before by leaving a chapstick in the pocket of her hoodie. The gray one she wore constantly, the one I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago. I found a receipt, not a suspicious receipt, nothing like that. It was from a pharmacy on Wyndham Street, vitamins, shampoo, a few other things, and prenatal vitamins. I stood there in the laundry room for probably 3 minutes, just staring at it. We hadn't been trying for another baby. We'd talked about it the previous year and decided to wait. The economy, the timing, the fact that Haley was still young. We agreed, or I thought we agreed. So why was she buying prenatal vitamins? I put the receipt in my own pocket. I finished the laundry. I came upstairs, and I watched my daughter eat her toast and I said nothing. That's not weakness. That's what you do when your brain is still trying to chup to something it doesn't want to be true. You need a minute, you need to think before you blow everything up, because if you're wrong you can't take it back. I spent the next 3 days being very calm and very normal. I helped Haley with her bath. I had dinner with my wife. I asked about her day and she told me things. And I nodded. Meanwhile I was going through our joint banking records on my phone. Late at night in the bathroom, with the fan running. Not because I'm sneaky by nature, I'm genuinely not. But because if I was going to have this conversation, I needed to know what I was walking into. The joint account didn't tell me much. But she had an e-transfer history I happened to see, when she left her phone on the counter unlocked. She went to get Haley from the backyard and her phone was just sitting there. I know how this sounds. I looked anyway. There were e-transfers to Garrett, nothing huge. $40 here, $60 there. The note said things like dinner and gas. Innocuous on their own, but there were 12 of them over 6 months, which is not what you do with someone who's just your husband's friend. You don't quietly pay a friend back for dinner 12 times over 6 months, and never mention it once. I thought about what these transfers could mean. I thought about the prenatal vitamins. I thought about how often Garrett had been at my house on evenings I wasn't home. I thought about whether I was being paranoid. Or whether I was finally seeing something I'd been looking at without registering for a long time. I called in sick to work on the Thursday. My wife took Haley to daycare and went to her own job, And I sat at the kitchen table with a coffee that got cold and I just thought. I am not a person who makes accusations without being certain. That might be a flaw, I don't know. But I needed to be sure before I set fire to my life. I texted Garrett that afternoon. Nothing accusatory. Just asked if he wanted to grab a beer, said I wanted to catch up. He said he was free Friday evening. Perfect. I didn't go to the bar. I told my wife I was meeting Garrett out and that I might be late, and instead I drove to a parking lot nearby. And I sat there and I called Garrett's number. He picked up. Sounding casual. Said he was at the bar already. Where was I? I told him I was running behind. Kept him talking for about 10 minutes about nothing. Hockey, some work thing he was dealing with. And the whole time I was watching the location on his phone through Find My Friends, which we'd set up years ago for exactly 0 reasons. Other than the fact that we were the kind of friends who shared those things. He was at the bar. I could see it. So he wasn't at my house, which meant I could go home and actually look. I don't know what I was looking for exactly. Proof of some kind. Something that would make it undeniable. I got home and I walked through the house, and I felt crazy, honestly. What was I going to find? And then I went into the bathroom in our bedroom. The one that's technically hers. The one I mostly use, the main floor bathroom, to let her have her space. I opened the cabinet under the sink. The prenatal vitamins were there, and behind them, half tucked behind a box of cold medicine, a positive pregnancy test. I sat down on the bathroom floor. I want to be clear, a positive pregnancy test is not by itself proof of anything except that your wife is pregnant. That's it. I knew that. I sat there and I breathed and I told myself I still didn't know anything for certain. But I also knew my wife and I hadn't slept together in almost 3 months. We'd been distant. I'd chalked it up to stress, to tiredness, to the usual friction of 2 people raising a small kid and working full-time. I hadn't pushed. I hadn't worried. I trusted her. And now I was sitting on the bathroom floor holding a pregnancy test, and the math didn't work. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I went downstairs. I texted Garrett and said something came up and I'd catch him another time. And he said no worries and sent a hockey meme. I stared at that meme for a long time. That night I barely slept. The next morning, after my wife left for work, I sat my daughter down with her cartoons and I made myself a plan. I did not want to confront my wife and have her lie to me. I did not want to confront Garrett and have him lie to me. I needed the truth before I had the conversation, not after, because once you start that conversation you lose control of the information. I waited. I know, people are going to read this and think I should have confronted her immediately, and maybe they're right, but I have a daughter. Haley is 4 years old, and she calls Garrett Uncle Garrett. And she loves her mom. And she loves our house. And her daycare friends and her routine. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I dismantled everything, because once it was dismantled it was gone. The confirmation came 11 days later. My wife left her laptop open while she went to answer the door. She was expecting a package. I walked past the dining room table, and I saw the screen and I saw the email she had open. It was to Garrett. The subject line was Appointment Wednesday. And the first line I could read from where I was standing. I didn't even have to stop walking. I just saw it as I passed. Said, I told you I'd handle it. Stop panicking. He doesn't know. I walked to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water. I drank it slowly. My wife came back in with her package and said something about how it was the wrong color. And she'd have to return it, and I said that's annoying. And she said I know, right? And we were 2 completely normal people. Having a completely normal conversation. 2 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, I asked my wife to call Garrett and invite him over. I told her I wanted to do an early dinner, the 3 of us. Like we used to before schedules got complicated. I made sure Haley was at my mother's for the afternoon. Told her we were doing some house things, and it'd be boring for a 4-year-old. Which was true, in a different sense than I let on. I watched my wife text him. I watched her face when she did it. There was a flicker of something, nervousness, maybe guilt, that she covered quickly. Garrett replied that he'd be over at 5. He showed up at 4:58, which is exactly like him. He always showed up on time. He came in the side door the way he always did, called out a hello, and walked into the kitchen where I was standing. I said, she's pregnant, Garrett. Is it yours? He stopped moving. He did that thing where a person's face goes through about 5 expressions in 2 seconds. And doesn't land on any of them. I watched him decide to deny it. I watched him open his mouth. I said don't. He closed it. He looked at the floor. And then he said yes. I don't really remember the next 30 seconds. I remember the sound. And I remember him going into the door frame. And I remember my wife screaming from the hallway where she'd been standing. I remember stepping back. I remember my hands shaking. I remember being very aware of the fact that my daughter was not in the house. Which was the only reason I stopped. Garrett left. He didn't say anything else. He just got up and left with blood on his face and I let him go. My wife was against the wall at the end of the hallway. She was crying. She started to say something and I held up my hand and she stopped. We stood there in silence for a while. Then I said, how long? She told me 14 months. I asked her whose idea it was. She said it just happened. I said that's not an answer. She said they'd both been feeling lonely. And it started one evening when I was away for work. And it wasn't supposed to be more than once, but then it was and she was sorry. She was so sorry. She knew it was wrong. I said, did you tell him you were pregnant before you told me? She didn't answer, which was an answer. I said, you need to go stay somewhere else tonight. She started crying harder and said she had nowhere to go. Her sister was in Calgary, she couldn't just. And I said, I don't care, and I meant it. I went upstairs and I came back down with a bag I'd packed for her 2 days before, because I'd known this was coming and I'd had time to prepare. I set it by the door. Al looked at it and looked at me, and I think that was the moment she understood that I'd known for a while. She left. I sat in my kitchen for 2 hours. Then I drove to my mother's, picked up Haley, told her mommy was visiting a friend for a few days. Haley asked if Uncle Garrett was there too. I said no, sweetheart, just mommy. That night I gave Haley a bath, read her 2 books, watched her fall asleep, and then I sat in the hallway outside her door and put my face in my hands. In the weeks that followed, I did the things you do. I called a lawyer. In Ontario that meant starting to think about the matrimonial home. Under the Family Law Act, both spouses have equal possession rights, which is one of those things you know abstractly until it's suddenly your actual life. My lawyer was straightforward about what the process would look like. We have a daughter together. That changes everything and makes everything more complicated at the same time. I told my wife she could come back to the house while we figured things out, but that we were done. She needed to understand that. I wasn't going to live like nothing happened. I wasn't going to go to counseling and work through it. I wasn't going to be the kind of man who decides 14 months. And a pregnancy is a bump in the road. That wasn't weakness, it wasn't bitterness. It was just clarity about what I could and couldn't live with, and I've always known my own limits. She moved back in for logistical reasons and we lived in that house like 2 people who barely knew each other. Which in some ways I suppose was accurate. Garrett I didn't speak to at all. He texted me twice. The first one was an apology so long and so elaborate that I could tell he'd rewritten it several times, and I read the whole thing and then deleted it. The second was shorter, just, I know there's nothing I can say. I just want you to know I'm sorry. I didn't respond to that one either. What was I going to say? That I accepted it? That we were good? There was no version of a response that would have meant anything real. The harder situation was our friends. We had a group, 7 of us, people we'd known since university, and a couple we'd met through work over the years. Garrett was part of that group. When word got out about what happened, and it got out, because Garrett apparently told one person in confidence, and that person told everyone. The group fractured in ways I'm still processing. 2 of them texted me immediately. Said they were disgusted, asked what they could do. That meant everything. One of them, a guy named, actually, I'll just call him my friend from Waterloo, drove out to Guelph on a random Wednesday night with a 6-pack of Moosehead and sat in the kitchen with me until midnight talking about nothing important. I won't forget that. The others were more complicated. 2 of them reached out to Garrett first, then to me, and in the texts to me they used phrases like both sides. And it takes 2. And I just didn't respond. One of them sent me a long message about how Garrett was struggling. And was I considering talking to him? I stared at that text for a long time before I archived it. And then there was my wife's family. Her parents are in Hamilton. And when she told them what happened, what she'd done, in her version or theirs, I don't know what she said exactly. Her mother called me. Her mother, who I'd had Christmas dinner with every year for 6 years. Who called me son at our wedding. She called me to tell me that I needed to calm down and not do anything drastic and to think about what this would do to Haley. Think about what this would do to Haley, I said. With respect, you should have a conversation with your daughter about what she was willing to do to Haley. Her mother said I was being cruel. I said goodbye, and I hung up. I have not spoken to her since. My own family was a different story. My parents, my dad, especially, were steady in a way I didn't know I needed until I had it. My dad drove down from Barrie the week after everything came out, didn't ask a lot of questions, just fixed the gate in the backyard that I'd been meaning to get to for a year, took Haley for ice cream on Wyndham Street, and told me before he left. You'll get through this. You're not the kind of person who doesn't. I held on to that. My sister, who lives in Vancouver and who never trusted my wife from day one. Never said it out loud, but I could always feel it. Called me the same night I found out. She stayed on the phone with me until 2 in the morning. She didn't say I told you so, which I'll respect her for forever. Here's the thing people don't tell you about this kind of betrayal. The grief doesn't come in stages. It doesn't move in a line. Some mornings I woke up and felt nothing. Just numb and functional. And I'd make Haley's lunch and drop her at daycare. And answer emails. And be a normal human being. And then some evenings I'd be washing dishes and a specific memory would surface. Garrett and me at a Leafs game, 3rd row. The year we scraped together enough for decent seats. laughing ourselves stupid at something that isn't even funny in retrospect. And I'd have to turn the tap off and just stand there for a minute. That's the part that hit hardest, honestly. Not the marriage. I know that sounds strange, but the marriage had been in trouble for a while, even if I hadn't let myself admit it. The friendship was different. The friendship felt solid. The friendship felt like the one thing you can always go back to when everything else is uncertain. And that was the thing he took from me. I did not set up any kind of financial arrangement for the baby. I want to be clear about this. The child is not mine. I have no legal obligation and no personal inclination to contribute to the financial future of a child. Conceived during 14 months of my wife sleeping with my best friend. That's not cruelty, that's just reality. I know there are people who would see it differently, who would say, child is innocent, which is true. But the child has two parents who are not me, and those two parents can figure it out together. I will for the rest of my life be present for my daughter. Haley is mine. She's the thing I did right in all of this, and I intend to be the best version of a father that I can manage, which some days is better than others, but is always genuine. She's 4. And she knows something is different, but she doesn't know what, and for now that's okay. My lawyer and I are working through the custody arrangement, and I'm fighting for as much time as the process allows. What I won't do is pretend. I won't sit across a table at Christmas for the sake of appearances. I won't let Garrett back into my life because someone in our friend group thinks forgiveness is good for me. I won't keep my wife's parents in the rotation because it's the polite Canadian thing to do. Some people are no longer in my life, and that's not a wound I'm nursing. It's a decision I made with a clear head after everything was on the table. There's a version of me maybe a year ago who would have found that kind of finality cold, who would have believed that you work things out, that relationships are worth fighting for, that forgiveness is strength. I still believe some of that. I believe in forgiveness as a private thing. Something you do for yourself so you don't carry the weight of it. But forgiveness doesn't mean reinstatement. You can let go of the anger and still close the door. Those two things can both be true. I'm still in Guelph. I thought about leaving, fresh start, new city, all of that. But Haley's daycare is here, and my parents aren't far, and I've lived in this city long enough that it's actually mine, not ours. I'm not going to let them have the city too. The house is still being sorted out through the lawyers. That's ongoing. I won't get into the details because frankly it's exhausting. And this isn't a legal advice column. What I will say is, get a lawyer early, document everything calmly, and don't make financial decisions while you're in the first 2 months of the worst thing that's happened to you. Garrett, as far as I know, is still in his condo across town. I drive past the building sometimes on my way to the grocery store. I don't feel much when I do, which surprised me the first time I noticed it. I expected rage or grief or something, but mostly I just feel like I'm driving past a building. I think that's what it looks like when something is actually over. My wife, she's just trying to get through this too, I think. I don't hate her. I want to be honest about that. I did, for a while. But she's Haley's mother, and she's going to be in my life in some form for the next 14 years minimum. And I can't afford to carry hate for that long. So I don't. What I feel now is closer to a kind of permanent distance. Like standing on one side of a very wide river and seeing someone on the other bank. They're there, but you're not crossest. The baby is due in the spring. I'll be here. I'll have Haley that weekend. Probably, depending on the schedule. And we'll do something normal. Maybe the Children's Museum on Gordon Street. Maybe just the park down the road if the weather's turned. And somewhere across town something will be happening that has nothing to do with me. And I'll make my daughter's lunch and I'll be fine. Because here's what nobody tells you. When your life falls apart, in a way you didn't see coming, you do actually keep going. Not in a movie way, not in a way that feels triumphant or redemptive in the moment. Just in the ordinary way that people keep going. You get up, you make the coffee. Your kid wants pancakes so you make pancakes. You answer your emails. You call your dad. You pick Haley up from daycare. And she runs at you the way 4-year-olds run. Full speed, completely committed, like you're the best thing she's seen all day. And you catch her, and for that moment that's the whole world. I hit my best friend in my kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon, and my life is completely different now than it was 8 months ago. And I am not okay in a lot of ways and I am more okay than I expected in others. Both of those things are true. All of it is true at the same time. And I'd do it again.